Thank you, Dr. Mack, for being so patient with us. Our guest tonight is Dr. Mack to talk about all of his expertise. He's a very interesting person. I like when you were talking about kind of what you did for work before. It was absolutely crazy.
But he also has a book that he's writing.
I have 13 books. I have 12 books that I've written and one that I'm writing.
Okay,
Yes.
so humble brag.
You're smarter than all of us. We know.
Just for point of clarity, I mean, I'm trying to sell some books. People got to know they exist if I'm going to sell them.
That's right.
Fair. So why don't you tell us a little bit about what you did? I know you worked for the government at one point. What you can tell us that you did, and what you do now.
Sure. So as far as like what I can, that was an interesting way of kind of saying that. First of all, can everybody hear me clearly? Am I coming through loud and clear?
Yep.
Great.
Perfect.
Okay. So my policy on, because I'm very anti-government now, but I also don't want to go to jail. So my policy is you can ask me anything. You just have to respect that I may have to decline to answer. So I try to be as open about my experiences as possible. So at the tender age of 19, I was at the John F. Kennedy Special Warfare School in Fort Bragg, North Carolina, where the government taught me to be a propagandist. The term the military uses is psychological operations and warfare. And what I think I mentioned that triggered this invitation was, PsyOp has kind of become a meme. Everything that happens, it's the slightest bit suspicious, or even if it's not suspicious, but we want to pretend like it is, oh, that's a PsyOp. Oh, that's a PsyOp. And that's funny to me because in 1999, I was a PsyOp specialist in a Army PsyOp unit. So while it's kind of become a meme to everybody else, like it was my job for a while, mostly in the reserves, actively working on psychological operations tasks, that were live in all over the world, even when we weren't at war with anybody, which is also interesting. So military psyop has lots of things that aren't really relevant to our current cultural conversation, and I'm perfectly fine talking about those. I just don't think they're particularly interesting. Like they're interesting to me, in a niche conversation. But I think most people are more interested in the psyops that are being run on us every day, and I'm pretty vocal about it. I'm pretty angry about the government's betrayal and its use of these techniques against the American people. And I've been pretty vocal about it for the last few years. COVID really brought me out into the open. I don't have a huge following, but if anybody does want to keep tabs on the ongoing conversation I'm trying to have with people, I'm all over social media. Primarily, I have a Facebook group called Macrobius Americana. It's just easier to find me than it, and then I will point you to it. But yeah, so that's what I did in the past that I think people would be most interested in. Just to give a real quick rundown of, I now have a doctoral degree in counseling. My focus is on deprogramming and moral injury. So those are the primary, like I counsel all kinds of people for all kinds of things. But I was an Army chaplain once I left the PsyOp game because it was awful. And that didn't work either. Just my mistrust and dislike of the government just kept pushing me, gave me a lot of cognitive dissonance. So now I do the opposite. I try to find people who have been psyoped, who have been programmed, and I try to help them break free.
You know what? It sounds like it's
and writing books. Jeez.
A lot of work. Tell me if this sounds like a good idea, chat, and you guys. I would like to suggest Dr. Mack for a culture war episode.
Honestly.
I think that would be a good conversation to hear.
I've actually put the invitation out there. I'm not sure what the criteria is to get that kind of invite. Like I don't have a booking agent, right? So that it may be as simple as that. My observation, I've only been watching the show since the spring, so I'm kind of new. I guess the Discord's new for everybody, but even just to this, the TimCast thing, the whole phenomena, I'm fairly new. But from what I can tell, I don't have a lot of social media reach, right? I literally spent the first half of my adult life like trying to go below the radar because of the nature of the work that I did. So, and then I step into this world where everybody's connected and there's all these established people and they have thousands, if not tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of followers. And it's hard to break through into that. So I do think I have an important piece of the conversation. I'd love to take any questions anybody has. I don't know how you all want to manage that. But yeah, as far as getting somewhere bigger and higher, I mean, I absolutely see this as a step. I'm really glad you all had me on today. And like I said, you can ask me anything, and I'll do my best to answer as honestly and forthright as possible.
All right,
So,
I got
there's a question.
Recognize
I have one from
the
the chat.
very important thing.
I
But do you want to let people come up and ask it, or do you want them to just put it in the chat?
I had someone that just threw one in the chat, so I was just going to read that one out loud since they already put it out there. It might be easier if y'all type questions just for now, because there might be a lot of questions, and I just would rather keep it kind of ordered. I am Poot. I love your name, by the way. Asked, can you give us an example of what being PsyOps looks like and how you would be deprogrammed?
Yes. So the sort of the one of the things I like to talk about when we talk about PsyOp is that it's not as magical or as mysterious as many people might think it is. So part of what I do is I break the spell. I try to break the mystery of propaganda. There is virtually no distinction between what an advertising agency does to sell you a product and what a foreign nation, or sadly now our own nation, does to try to convince you to buy their cultural and political agendas. So it's advertising. Like, it's in a weird way. I still have this cognitive dissonance of where I did this for so long, like, and I wasn't out in the public view. I want it to be mysterious. Like, I want to be like, I want to sound like the super cool guy who's got all the secrets. But the fact of the matter is, as somebody who is dedicated to helping people break free of the programming, we have to be honest about what's happening to us. It's advertising. It's just not a product that they want you to buy with money. It's ideas that they want you to buy with your identity, with your soul, with your heart, with your mind. And so, the short answer, and forgive me if I'm a little verbose, I listen a lot for a living now. So when I get a chance to talk, I do revel in it. But the shorter answer of what is a psyop, it's an advertising campaign. It's just not for a commercial product.
Okay.
I have one real quick.
Go for it.
Moon landing, real or fake?
So that's a very interesting question. I don't have any firsthand knowledge of whether it was real or fake, but it is a great example of psychological operations and warfare because we were in the Cold War when that happened. And whether it was real or not, it had propaganda value. The accomplishment was played for propaganda effect. American Greatness, which at the time I would have been fully on board with the version of American Greatness they were selling at the time, but they did have to sell it. They didn't just have to sell it to the world; they had to sell it to American citizens. There's no period in our history where people haven't felt disenfranchised, they haven't felt alienated and angered. The Soviet Union's doing all this communist stuff, and that's attractive to a lot of people right here in the U.S. Back then, as much, if not more so than now. So yes, whether it was a true physical on the moon or not, I actually personally believe it's true, and that's maybe a different conversation that's not in my expertise area. But when it comes to psychological operations, it was a psyop, whether it was real or fake. It was absolutely used for propaganda purposes to sell American greatness.
Good. Okay. Yeah, it's good. I have one from Plike Designs that's kind of a two questions here. But first, what is your favorite psyop? And secondly, what's your favorite clandestine operation in the past, like Operation Mincemeat? Oh God, I forgot about that one. Okay.
So again, as somebody who did this professionally and now is angry and skeptical about how often it is done, to ask me what my favorite is a very ironic question. But it does give me a great opportunity to talk about something that psychological operations, propaganda in general, doesn't have to necessarily be negative. It's all in how it's being used, what they're trying to accomplish, and how transparent or secretive they're being about it. So a great example of quote unquote good psyop are mine awareness campaigns. There are places all over the world where children who are just out playing soccer have their arms and legs blown off because they step into dangerous places where wars were fought before their parents were born. Like that still happens to this day. So my favorite PsyOp was we teamed up with DC Comics to create Superman comics in Spanish where he saves a child from a landmine and then flies him over the sky and teaches him what to watch out for so he can tell his friends what to watch out for and they won't. And now he gets to be the superhero who saves kids the way he was saved by Superman not letting him step on the landmine. And how do we distribute those comic books? We gave them all free ice cream and a comic book. And I wasn't personally there giving them out, but it is my favorite. It is my favorite iteration of a psychological operation campaign. You identified a target audience, you had a targeted behavior that you wanted them to do, and then you created a product, an American superhero who comes and helps them learn to behave the way you want them to behave. And then part B was what was the part B? Sorry.
Like a more historical clandestine operation.
So I don't know about, so clandestine is a big word. It can mean a lot of different things. Let me just say that I think one of the most underappreciated, and yet it was in full view of the public, was in Panama, Operation Just Cause, 1993, I think. So that would have been like 7 years before my time. Emmanuel Noriega, they had won, but he was in his compound and he was hunkered in and, short of like just bombing it from, orbit, which is probably what we do now, send in drones or something. Back then, they just played Metallica and Lynyrd Skynyrd until it drove him crazy enough to surrender. And that's what they did. They pulled up in Humvees with loudspeakers mounted on the roof and they just rocked out with the citizens who were brave enough to come and hang out with the soldiers, and until Noriega was just like, I can't do this anymore. And they actually had done studies on him. These were probably CIA studies, not Army studies. But anyway, the intel agencies share all that information. There were studies on him where he had spoken to multiple people about how much he hated heavy metal music and had specifically name dropped Metallica more than once. So absolutely, we rolled up and we played Metallica until he literally said, fuck it, I'm out, and surrendered.
I mean, me personally, I would have enjoyed that. I mean, I'm a huge Metallica fan, so that would not have been a problem for me.
But they would have found who you hate, and they would have done that instead, right? So I don't know what kind of music you don't like, but it could be turned on you pretty quick.
Taylor Swift.
Yeah.
So did you primarily work on like military psyops?
So mostly what I did, particularly on the reserve side, was I did some of this research. So we had active areas even in 1999, right? This is pre 9/11. We're not at war with anybody, right? Well, there's wars all over the world, and we're supporting. We pick a side in every war there is, and so I was mostly doing like research. So I was speaking with English speakers in foreign countries, and I was looking at data that other people had collected. My job, the last job I did that was sort of like a live assignment, was I was actually collating. You had multiple people getting data points from different foreign nationals, and I was looking at that for the common threads. So what do we know about this culture that's just like common knowledge? And what do we know about this culture that's like, not less than common knowledge, but it's cataloged. And then I'm cross-referencing that with like individual people who have shared their opinions about what's going on in their culture and the things that are happening in America. And I'm passing that information on to the people who are actually building the PsyOps and running them, either giving them as like a playbook to our foreign allies to actually run, or are they in support of the foreign allies actually running the PsyOp themselves.
I feel like I could be asking you about these all night long and still not hear enough.
I know, right? Like, definitely. Let's see. I'm reading through. This is a question from the chat. Would you consider yourself a data analyst?
In a very limited way. I think a better description of me would be like a cultural analyst. That would probably be more accurate. But how am I analyzing the cultures? Through data. So, I would never call myself a data analyst because that's like a technical job with like very specific check boxes that I probably don't meet all of. In that role though, in that limited capacity, sure, I think calling me a data, if somebody else called me one in that role, I wouldn't disagree.
Well, I mean,
Interesting.
based on what you've said, I would say you could be a data analyst pretty easily.
I didn't do very good in stats in school though. I think that might preclude me.
Eh, the stats are important, but I mean, a computer can tell you the actual stats. It's understanding what's behind those stats that's actually important, and that's more or less what you're saying you did.
Yeah, and so
Right?
along the lines of that, like data analyst, one of my other many hats that I wear, I actually do all of my counseling work. Well, have since COVID done all of my counseling work for free pro bono, and I write books, but I make money on them, but not like enough to sustain myself. I'm actually a day trader and a stock arbitrageur. That's how I make my money, is through like buying and selling stocks. And it's funny how similar, like analyzing the data and comparing it to the culture I live in, comparing it to what's in the news, to informs the stocks that I buy and sell. So the more I think about it, I never thought of myself as a data analyst, but the more I think about it, some of those skills have carried over into what I do now. So maybe I am a data analyst. I don't know. I'm a lot of things.
Yeah.
Reading
I mean,
this chat.
more people are data analysts than they realize. It's a fancy title for someone who just looks at a situation and draws conclusions. You're not always right. It's just you find a thread and you pull on it and
Sure.
see where it takes you.
Yeah, I mean that's if that's your definition, then sure. Put me on the data analyst list.
See,
Are you
add that to
familiar
your
with
resume now.
the video game Metal Gear Solid?
Only passingly. I'm not a PlayStation guy, so but I am vaguely familiar with it.
Okay, I was gonna ask you how the whole, because it's like called tactical espionage. How does that relate to something like propaganda? Because I feel like the two are kind of related, right? You're using propaganda to
Yeah.
like trick and manipulate the other side as well.
So yes, there's a strong, so psychological operations in the military is technically not considered part of like the intel community. It's not part of the S2. It's part of the S3, which in the military lingo is the operations section. So you have like quartermaster, planning, intelligence. There's all these breakdowns. So technically, it's not considered an intel job. However, we work hand in hand with intel, because without intel, we can't do anything. Not only do we not have the information we need to create, psychological. I've defaulted back to saying we, like I'm still doing this. I don't do this anymore. Very intentionally don't do this anymore. But a PsyOp person cannot plan or execute their mission without coordination with the intel community. The intel community gives them what they need to know to build their PsyOp campaign, and then the intel community tells them when and where it needs to be executed, like in real time. And to use the advertising analogy, that would be like, okay, we want to sell this action figure. Who am I going to sell it to? Well, I don't know. You just, you want to sell it. So the guy can make a commercial for it, but without the information that he needs for the commercial's it's not gonna be anything. It's just gonna be pictures of the product. Then once you know who you're selling it to and the merits of what you're selling, then you need to discuss with somebody, where do you put these ads? You're going to put your action figure ads on MSNBC at midnight? Of course not. But there are, like Nickelodeon maybe would be so that's your sort of equivalent to the relationship between PsyOp and Intel.
So here's a question. I mean, we talk about building culture and winning that culture war all the time. Would it be possible to build one of these campaigns and target it against our elected officials to achieve that outcome?
Sure. Against our elected officials. So there is this concept. I'm trying to remember the exact technical term. You got to remember, I haven't done this for almost 20 years. But anyway, the technical term probably doesn't matter to you guys. So there's a resilience in certain communities, right? So if you take it in terms of military psyop, there are some enemies that you just want to put a bullet in their forehead. You just want to drop a warhead on them. You know, when you're dealing with, like, for example, like the elite guard of like a dictator, you know, the psychological operations don't work so well on them. But when it comes to like the guy who was conscripted in the army, the psychological operations work really well on him, and we don't want to kill him because he'll work for us when you know when the fighting's over. So, you know, or just the civilian populace, you know, in a foreign nation, you know, when you're trying to save lives, you know, I don't have a problem with, you know, engaging in psychological warfare tactics against civilian populace if you're trying to win their culture and prevent further conflict. So again, it's this idea that not all psyop is necessarily negative. However, to answer your question, there are people who are resistant and resilient to these kinds of operations, and one of the big factors is power, or two of the biggest factors are power and money. So if you're already in a position of power, you have to the psyop would have to threaten their position of power, and I think that happens every election season, except they're running psyop on us to vote for them instead of us running psyop on them to think they're not going to get reelected. So at that point, it just sort of devolves into a conversation, and they have more money and power. So, you know.
That's fair.
But I think your thought is the right thought. I mean, I think when we talk about like grassroots campaigns and, you know, these independent people or these you know, libertarian-ish Republicans who manage to get the Republican nomination, in a way, that's exactly what they're doing. Is they're running a psyop campaign against different establishments, whether it's the Republican Party establishment, whether it's the status quo of the party that normally wins in their district, you know, or whether it's these established candidates who thought they were going to get reelected and they didn't. You know, they are a political campaign is in and of itself very much an advertisement campaign, which, like I've said, is very much a psyop.
Mm-hmm. Like emotional
Yeah.
manipulation.
It is interesting to think about it from the grassroots campaign aspect.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's what you would be appealing for if you're like, we need to psyop the people in power. You know, the grassroots campaigns, like, I'd rather just the grassroots campaigns win and we get better candidates, but their existence and the pressure they put on the people, like, so say the establishment person does get reelected, if we can make it hard on them, if we can make their election closer, if we can make them work for it, well, you know, that has a psychological effect that will shape their policies in their next term. I would think. I mean, if you know, according to the rubrics that I go by, that should work to some degree.
Yeah, more pressure on them. Definitely might change something about them. Like, oh, why are we this close now? I got to do something to keep my power, so I might have to give a little concessions, even if like the person you're running against them doesn't win.
Yep.
So, do you think that people can be resistant to psyops, or is it strictly based on how the psyop is presented?
So yeah, so when you're talking about, so psychological operations are run against groups. So when you're talking about like manipulating individuals, like we used to jokingly refer to it as a Jedi mind trick. That's not really what psyop is or does. Like, that's a thing, and there are people who are good at it. But that, you know, when you're doing psychological operations, you're looking at you're seeking out a target audience. You're analyzing the factors in that target audience, whether it's their emotional state, their financial state, their ties to one another, their beliefs, their values. Those, you know, you're analyzing a target audience. Then you create the campaign for the audience, and there will always be people in that audience who are like, F this, like, hell no. So, you know, you want to minimize, the whole purpose is to minimize the number of people that will do that, but those people will always exist. So when you're talking about individuals, absolutely some people are more resistant to psyop. And I think the best example of that you'll all immediately be aware of goes back to, again, the comparison to advertising. Television commercials. People just change the channel now. People just tune it out. People will watch a television commercial, maybe even laugh at the joke in the middle of it, and then 5 seconds later not even tell you what the commercial was selling. They don't even know the brand that was in front of them. Like through repeat and routine exposure to certain inputs, people do absolutely develop a resistance. And so that's, like, I think the great, like, example of our day is, you know, television commercial space is not nearly as valuable as it was, say, 15 years after the television was invented.
campaigns, is there a scalability to them? Like, understandably, you can go pretty big with a campaign and target a wide portion of the population at once. Can you get it down to just a small group?
Yes, absolutely. So
Scale?
it's all about, it's the scaling is all about, can you identify a culture, or in the modern lingo, like a subculture, right? So we have macro cultures like Americans. There are things, as disrupted and broken as our nation is right now, there are things that all Americans have in common, even if they're not values. Their inputs, right? Like you mentioned, not everybody likes Taylor Swift, but damn near everybody knows who she is, right? That's just a thing we have in common. So if you were doing a psyop, you would say, well, not everybody likes this actor or this musician, but man, as a whole, they really love their celebrities. They, like from top to bottom, left to right, they all got some kind of celebrity that they love. So maybe if we had the celebrities say these things, enough people will sign on to them to get what we want. That's a psyop. So yeah, so that's an example of like a macro level cultural psychological operation. But you can make it smaller, because certain states or certain regions of the country have their own culture. I think the biggest obvious example is Texas. There are things that are distinctly Texan, and that doesn't mean people in Kentucky or Tennessee or Louisiana, don't share some of those same vibes. But you'll find the greatest concentration of universally Texan things, surprise, surprise, in Texas. So you could create a psychological operation like for Texas. You could have people saying and doing certain things to support certain ideas, and always have them wearing the 10-gallon hat. Always having them wear a nice pair of boots. Every time they're seen on TV saying the thing or showing up in public doing the thing, they look like the way Texans think other Texans should look, or an iconic Texan might look. And so that could be like a mid-level psyop campaign. But then to go back to the one where we talk about the mind awareness campaign, that was targeted not just to all Spanish-speaking countries. I mean, it was specifically the Central American countries that have had all these these wars, and specifically even with that, their children, and specifically even within that, their children who are interested in American culture and American ideas. So that's a very specific psyop campaign to a certain language group in a certain geography that share certain interests and values, and even an age demographic.
That is interesting. And I put another question in the chat really quick, but I can actually answer that for her too. Where do you get the data on people?
So
where don't you get the data on people?
So where you can get the data on people is there's a website. I haven't been to it recently. I'm assuming it still exists. It's straight up called the CIA World Factbook. And when it comes to like cultural data of the exact kind we've been talking about that has been declassified, the CIA uploads it to the CIA World Factbook, and you can just go as an American citizen and build your own PsyOp campaign, I suppose.
Right on.
So pretty much like, and they cross-reference, like I said, the military, and they all communicate and share data at this point. So the CIA World Factbook, if it's declassified and it's cultural data, as far as I know, the CIA World Factbook's the best place to go to get it.
Excellent. So,
what do you think would be an effective PsyOp for us to run against the left?
Oh man, so that's a difficult question, and I think the biggest problem with that is they are resistant to the kinds of messaging we would want them to hear, right? So the advantage to trying to run a PsyOp against the left is that they are very monolithic, that they're not really liberal, right? They've basically created an artificial right that is just everybody who's not them. So there are a lot of core tenets that they all believe. So that's a vulnerability from a psychological operations perspective. That's a vulnerability. However, those core tenets are held to so strongly that any messaging we'd try to get through to them would be rejected on its face. So you would have to have other leftists who believe or seem to believe all the same things they do pick one topic and start It's like that meme where I think it's Buscemi, and he's got like the AC/DC shirt on, and he's got a skateboard, and he's like, "Hello, fellow youths." You'd have to have like somebody who was a convincing leftist take one thing that was not left and start getting other non-leftists to share that idea. But when we're in a culture war, like we don't want any of their stuff. Like I think most people that listen to like TimCast, even if you like universal healthcare, even if you have some lefty ideas, the vast majority of the stuff the left is pushing out, we don't want any of it. So to create a campaign that would overcome their resistance and exploit their vulnerability, you would have to pick one thing at a time. But because the coalition on the right doesn't have that monolithic state, we all have different priorities. Some people are single issue voters. And so, can we ever agree on what that one thing we want to try to incept into their community is? I just, I can't, I don't want to say it can't be done, but it's daunting. And there's a reason why it hasn't been done, maybe is the best way to answer that question.
All right, we're going to bring an audience member up to ask a question.
Sweet.
Defect. Come on down. Join the stage.
All right, so I'm gonna say that we're kind of seeing some cracks in the left. If you haven't noticed, it was like Eric Adams, the mayor of New York, a year ago, 2 years ago. Send me all of your immigrants, all the immigrants. Now he's kind of changed his tune. So, is there not some cracks in the left's ideology that cannot be that can be maybe manipulated with psyops, or not even manipulated, just break through?
So I think the issue is he's not really like these leftist figureheads aren't actually leftists, right? Like they don't actually believe what the people like that they're supporting believe. They just say those things and do those things to get reelected. So he says, "Oh, send me all the illegal immigrants." He's running a psyop on the people he wants to vote for him. And then when they're all there and they're destroying his town, and he realizes, "Man, this is gonna diminish my power. Even if I get reelected, my credibility is going down the drain." So now all of a sudden he wants to get rid of him. So because the governors who are sending him illegal immigrants are running a psyop campaign against him. They're creating a scenario that puts the pressures on him in the right way to get him to change his behavior. So it's again, it's almost conversational.
The governor's not sending him the overwhelming majority. It's
Well,
like 10% of the migrants sent to New York have been sent from Texas.
Sure, and so
like 10 to 15,000. That's probably like a couple weeks old. So
yeah, and so I did sort of
But the thing is, his constituents, the people, like these are hardcore Democrats. This is not a red district, even close, not even close to purple. And these people are screaming to close the border. So how can, like you say, like, no, we can't use psyops? And
I'm not saying we can't.
I'm not for that, but
I'm not
right
saying
now
we
is
can't.
the opportune time. Like I think that right now they're kind of on their heels. They've been going for this open border policy, and there's a lot of cities. It's New York, it's Chicago, it's L.A. There's other cities too, but they're starting to feel. Then the people are feeling it, and it's kind of time to strike.
I appreciate your question. I actually agree with what you want to do. So when I say this, I don't want you to think I'm dismissing it, because I really do think like you're onto something. But this is also kind of where I said psyop is almost a meme now. It's like everything's a psyop, and this is the danger, right? So there is a cultural thing occurring. There are people who are having to eat crow for their bad policies, and their bad policies coming home to roost. Sorry for the mixed metaphor. Their bad policies coming home to roost are going to make themselves change their own policies. So not everything's a psyop. It's just that's my.
No, I'm sorry. I was using psyop because you're in here. You're talking about
Sure.
psyops and stuff.
Sure.
I mean, the thing is, you don't have to use this. You can just come out with the truth.
Yeah, exactly.
You don't have to use a psyop. You
Exactly.
Just be like, hey, what has changed? Oh, look, Donald Trump was trying to shut down the border. Oh, now this guy opens up the border. But anyways, that was pretty much it. You guys can send me on down if you want.
No, I love where your head's at, and I agree that they're having to reap the play stupid games, win stupid prizes. Like they're in it,
Yes.
they're in it deep, and
Every
it's
round, find out.
and it would be hilarious if there weren't so many people like actually suffering over it. Like there's a part of me that wants to laugh at it, but then I also see like the humans caught up in it, and it's tragic.
I agree.
But we tried to stop.
agree.
We tried to tell them, and they wouldn't listen. So now they have to deal with the fallout.
Yeah, you can go and sit me on down. Thank you, though. Thank you, guys. Thank you for
Thank
what
you.
guys do.
Thank you.
Flight designs.
Hey guys, how's everybody doing?
Hey, hey.
You design.
Hey, so I had a question, but it's kind of timeline specific. If you could discuss your timeline, but I wanted to know how events like the USS Cole, the Kenya bombing, the embassy bombing, and then also things that occurred during the GWAT era, because that's my era of like Abu Ghraib and all those other things kind of affected your guys' daily life, or is how you guys had to approach things. Also with things like Al Jazeera being very, very prevalent and propaganda getting pushed, just like the Blackwater massacre that happened in Fallujah, where they attacked the contractors. How did that affect your guys' timeline? Or not the timeline, but your daily life basically working?
Yeah. So that you again, I do a lot of things. I've been a lot of different things, so it's hard to encapsulate it all. The time periods you're talking about, early to middle of the whole GWAT era, I was no longer doing psychological operations and warfare. So in my career, my last PsyOp job was in a special forces unit, and I attempted to transition to be a special forces like a special forces soldier. Specifically, I was going to be a special forces medic, and I did not successfully complete that course of training, and I did not want to go back to PsyOp because I had figured out was starting to figure out some of the positions that I hold now, and so I actually got out of the military altogether, and was went to seminary. And for those of you that don't know, I'm a clergy person as well. And so I went to seminary, so I was keeping tabs on all that stuff. But I mean, and I cared because lots of people I served with were still in. But yeah, I mean, I can't speak to like a lot of those specific things in that time frame because I either wasn't in PsyOp anymore or I just wasn't in the military at all. And I ended up coming back into the military to be a chaplain because I thought, well, this will be different. Like I still care about soldiers, I still care about my country. I just can't do the thing that I used to do. So I will do something else. I will find another way to contribute and serve. But then every time I put the uniform on, I just felt like there were so many things the government was doing. It's like, how can I serve my country in this uniform when all I'm really doing is serving a government that I don't respect? I am part, even though I'm just a chaplain, and I'm just trying to help soldiers like live their lives. I still am part of this machine that I do not respect. So I know that wasn't really your question, but when it comes to like the technical specifics during that time frame, I had moved on by that point.
Do you have any events that occurred that you can discuss? Because I did government contracting and I did stuff too in the Marine Corps that I can't openly discuss. So that's what I was just asking.
Yeah, when it comes to like specific
9/11 occurring.
Yeah, when it comes to specific operations and what I was doing operationally, I probably have already reached the limit of what I should say.
Okay, no, that's fine. I understand NDAs and everything. So
Yeah.
So thank you.
Thank you.
All right, we're gonna bring Vault 95 on. Survivor. Vault 95 survived. Vault survived into 95 times. So,
Dude, sorry, can you hear me?
Yes.
good.
No, crawl out from the fallout.
Cool. Yes, sir, I shall do that. So I got a question for Mac 1980. You're the PsyOp man, right?
Yeah, Dr. Mac, that's me.
Okay, so I got a question then. Someone did ask earlier about, is it possible to run a PsyOp on a leftist? And you were saying that they are very resistant to PsyOp. largely because of cult mentality.
Yeah, they're not internally. There are plenty of people running PsyOp on them. It's just doing one from the right to accomplish an objective the right would want would be very difficult. They would have a built-in resistance to that. But they're running this stuff on each other left and right. I mean, that's a bad. They're running PsyOp. The government is running PsyOp on them, and they are running PsyOp on each other rampantly. So it's not that they're resistant to PsyOp, it's that they're resistant to any objectives someone outside their group would want to convince them to do.
Okay, so since we now have Midjourney, Tim likes to talk about this a lot. Now that this power is available, could we destabilize their command structure? Because we know leftists are absolutely, totally on board with just, it's the NPC meme, insert or remove SD cards and change them out of what to be angry about today. So could we use things like Midjourney to make videos of, say, one of their cult leaders like Cenk Uygur, have him saying something
like he wanted to have sex with a horse? He already did that.
No, I'm not talking about the horses. I'm not talking about even insulting them.
I was making a joke, sorry.
Like, make a fake video about him. In other words, lie, but F it. It's a culture war. What would be a good example? Like, I don't want to be too on the nose, say something like, the free market is actually good. What would just something really benign.
Yeah,
or
but
even as Tim was saying, just like change one little word, and whenever their cult leaders say something, these leftists will absolutely fall in line. Some of them who are listening to Cenk, they will fall in line. Others who are not, they will get confused whenever their people they may know who do listen will say, hey, Cenk said a thing. The other guys will say, no, he didn't, and they end up start fighting each other.
I want to attempt an answer, and if you want more information, if it's incomplete, you can direct me. I'm glad to be directed. But I think to answer the first part of your question, I think there is an opportunity. The sub question is, do you want to filthy dirty yourself to take it? And that is ultimately, and I don't mean you personally. That's not an insult. Because I'm personally, I don't think the civilians in the American populace should be the subject of psychological operations. That is a core value of mine. Like, I'm trying to help people. I'm trying to deprogram people, right? So I don't want to run a PsyOp on a leftist. I want to have a conversation with a leftist, and not all of them will, or they won't converse in good faith. So the number of leftists I can have a decent conversation with, I understand it's minimal, but I'm not personally interested in running a PsyOp on the left or on a leftist. I'm interested in trying to help leftists analyze their own beliefs, find their own consistencies, and find the truth about what motivated them to the beliefs they have, and if there are better ways for them to accomplish what they think they want for the world, and ask themselves, is this really what I want for the world? So, and I understand that that's not going to win a culture war, and I understand that that's not a tactic that's useful to most people, but for me personally, I don't want to run PsyOp on people. I want to liberate people from the PsyOps that are already being run on them.
Okay, that sounds very noble. Okay, good. Yeah, I mean, I just had.
It's a noble way to lose a culture war. Like, I'll own that. Like, I'm not going to be the guy who wins this. Like, I'm not.
Okay, yeah, because it's like that balancing act there. It's like put it on the scales and try to get it balanced. Because it's like, I was thinking about this a week ago in terms of, like, say, abortion or whatever. Some of these people, that's like, we want to ban abortion outright. And I pondered on it. It's like, we could put your efforts instead of towards gaining abortion, instead towards winning elections. Because once you achieve the particular position of legal power, then you can affect the abortion. What would be controlling the seat of power actually be more important first in order to enact what you're looking to gain? In this case, abortion.
This is me speaking not as a former PsyOp guy, but just as me and all the different things I've done over the years. Big changes don't seem to have staying power, right? So we elected Donald Trump. I didn't vote for him either time. I'll just be completely transparent. If he gets on the ballot, I will vote for him this time. That's not really the point, but I just want to be transparent with everybody. Anyway, as a country, we elected Donald Trump. And it was a big change compared to 8 years of Barack Obama. Even 1 year of Donald Trump was a huge shift. It didn't last. He didn't get reelected. Now, we could argue about why and elections and all that stuff, and that's fine. Fact of the matter is, it was a big change and didn't last. We got third-term Obama, hollow man, Joe Biden. All right? Well, that was a big change from Trump. And guess what? It doesn't look like Joe Biden has a snowball's chance in hell of getting reelected. So then we're going to have another big change. And if you look at this maps out onto almost all aspects of life. People who lose weight rapidly almost always gain it back. But if you go on a steady diet and you make small changes to your activity level and your food consumption, you can lose weight and keep it off. And it's the same. So all the problems in our country didn't happen overnight. They happened incrementally. Well, I think the best way to create lasting change is incrementally. We have to start walking back from some of these things. We have to start walking toward new things. But these big radical shifts, tricking somebody with a PsyOp, for example, into voting for you or supporting your cultural agenda, and say you get it, say you win, say you do it, you pull the wool over their eyes and you get them to do the thing. You're Bernie Sanders and you get them all to vote for you, whatever. That's a massive change that people aren't going to have a taste for. And I think we see it right now with like the immigration thing that's been mentioned several times tonight. It for these cities that said they wanted to be sanctuary cities, they said they wanted these people in their cities. It was a massive change. And guess what? It ain't going to last because they don't want them in their cities anymore. And I just think we see this in all aspects of life. We don't need big, massive, radical change. We need to walk away from the bad things and walk toward the good things. Incrementalism got us into this trap, and incrementalism will get us out of it.
I want to say thank you to Dr. Mack for being here tonight. It has been great. So let's turn our attention to Sparky for a little bit here. And
Sparky, what's up?
Hey, Dr. Mack, first off, we talked earlier.
Yeah.
We were talking about
Goats. Goats and saffron and apple trees.
Yeah, saffron, I don't know much about that, but the journey of being self-sufficient
Yes.
is always a journey. It's never a destination of being I'm actually self-sufficient.
Right.
It's always journeying towards that. Because you can always be more self-sufficient, you can never be less.
Yes, sir. And I think we all should be, even if you live in a major city, even if you can't be super self-sufficient, you should find the little ways in which you can be more self-sufficient. It'll give you a hedge over everybody else in the shit hits the fan.
all right.
Yeah, exactly. I'm just listening over the last hour or so to you, to everybody in this channel. Like, the amount of times that PsyOp was said, it honestly did turn me off a little bit. It was just like PsyOp this, PsyOp that. Everything's a PsyOp.
That's the meme. Everything's a PsyOp. Yep.
Yeah, it's meta.
But, it very well might be. But, and you know what, I might be misunderstanding some of the stuff that was said, but from what I understood, from what I listened to, it was just like there's nothing you can do to get away from these PsyOps. It's always PsyOp this, PsyOp that, news, blah, blah, blah.
Oh, I don't want to blackpill you. You can create a personal resiliency to it, and I think the first step in that is acknowledging that it is happening. So just by being here and hearing that word so much that it annoyed you, you have taken the first step into becoming more resistant to PsyOp because now you hate it and you know it's happening.
There you go.
You know what, maybe.
Perhaps this whole lesson has been a PsyOps to help you guys recognize PsyOps.
So it's been a deprogramming session. If I can be frank, like these are the kind of things I talk. Not less interviewing me, but these are the kinds of things I talk about generally with people that were doing deprogramming. Like, have you considered that this is happening to you? Are you aware that this has happened to people in the past? How does that make you feel when you realize this has happened to other people? Do you think this bears any semblance to the things that are happening to you? Like this is, low key, but this is, just to be transparent, kind of a deprogramming session. But I also recognize I'm speaking to an audience that's largely deprogrammed already. So kudos to you.
Yeah, and you know what? That might be 100% true. But what I really want to get on here and talk about is the fact that it is opening season in Ohio for bow season for deer.
Sweet.
And if anybody, Ohio, I'm going out hunting tomorrow. I think the sunrise is at 7:25. I'll be out there at 6 o'clock, waiting for that 30 minutes before sunrise, which is around 7 or so. But like, that's the kind of stuff that we should be spreading on this stuff. It's not, hey, you're being affected by PsyOps this, PsyOps that. It should be how to get around that, how to, make yourself better from it.
So there's two. I want to speak to what you're saying because I agree and I don't. Yeah. I have a cabin. I have 23 acres in Kentucky that's not really near anything. I want the culture war to be won. I want my nation to become sane again, but I also recognize that I cannot depend on those outcomes. That I need a plan. I need an infrastructure, a personal infrastructure in place in case those things get worse rather than better. Now I'm very hopeful. I think there are a lot of signs that things are going in the right direction. I feel much like Tim often talks about, they're having tantrums, they're throwing fit. These are acts of desperation. I think a lot of the stuff that we sometimes immediately think is a flex on the side of the left is actually a sign of their weakness. They're desperate. So I want to think we're winning, or at least that we can win, that we're turning the tide. However, learning how to shoot a bow, owning a rifle, knowing what a deer looks like. Some of these people in the city have some weird ideas, right? Like talking about deer season and sharing with other people that you're going hunting and it's a real thing that real people do. Like, yes, all of that's valuable too. Me talking about the fact that I have a cabin in the woods. Like, yes, we need to be sharing that information as well, because we need to inspire other people to begin to take those steps to become more self-sufficient. Because, hey, this government might get worse and you might want to just opt out. You at least want to have the option, or if you're forced into the option, have as much in play as possible. So I don't disagree with you. However, tonight we were going to talk about PsyOp. That's why I'm here, so that's what I'm doing.
Once again, the PsyOp thing really turns my neck around the other side of, it was PsyOp this, PsyOp that, PsyOp. It was like Alex Jones times 12. That being said, Dr.
I'm a gorilla.
Will you allow me to go hunt on your land? We will split the deer harvest equally.
No.
Alright, so you don't.
That's fair. That's fair. Thank you.
He rejected you, so that's a good point. Yeah.
All right, Panda-ish. You've been waiting a minute to talk.
So since Dr. Mack is covering PsyOps, I actually ran it, because I was in from 99 to 2013 doing both active and contracting.
So you're a PsyOp guy. You're a PsyOp guy as well. You're a PsyOp guy as well.
What's that?
You're a PsyOp guy as well.
For a little bit.
That's cool. I have the hardest time. I have the hardest time finding anybody, right? So you're probably experiencing the same thing I am, where you're seeing all these memes and these commentators saying PsyOp this and PsyOp that, and you're like, there are actually people who know about this stuff. Why is no one talking to them? Yeah. Okay. Anyway, cool. It's cool to meet somebody else that's actually knows this stuff.
Well, somebody probably questioned, data analyst. I'm an analyst. It's in a sense data, yes. but also I did PsyOps for a little bit because I was up in the reserves over in Sacramento in their PsyOp unit.
Okay.
For the second special.
Okay.
And but like 2003 in Iraq, a simple one that we did was they knew that we could see into the night, so we literally made them believe that our Ray-Bans, because they started issuing everybody Oakleys and Ray-Bans, and we made them all think that they were X-ray vision and night vision. So like anytime we bust into a room, like trying to clear it out and everything, if we captured anybody, we'd go through there and be like, oh, we could see the weapons right there. And then they'd, flip over the rug, and then there'd be like 20 AKs and an RPG, stuff like that. That's
yeah.
Like
so you exploited. You identified a group who you identified knowledge. You identified something that they believed, and then you took the things that you had, and you took the belief they had and the things that you had, and you capitalized on that belief to cause them to become more compliant with your raids. Yes, am I understanding that correctly?
Yeah, basically.
Okay, so I'm just trying to break it down. I'm trying to break it down for people so they understand.
Hollywood movies that they thought like our Oakleys and Ray-Bans were X-ray vision.
Yeah,
goggles.
well, right, but I mean you took that information and exploited it for your objective. Now, my question is, what was your objective? Like, was it just to like it wasn't a prank? Like you actually, there was a value to getting them to believe that. So, what was the value in that?
I mean, at nighttime, it does make them more cautious, like the actual enemy who's actually shooting at us. It makes them more cautious of when they see anybody with glasses, Oakleys or Ray-Bans. It made them cautious to even try to attack us at night.
So it made them reluctant to kill you, which meant you had to kill less of them. And this is what I wanted to get across to people earlier. PsyOp doesn't have to be bad. Like, you can save lives if you can convince them not to fight, or if you can even just convince them to fight less. So, and not just our lives of our troops, but of their own. So it doesn't have to be like PsyOp doesn't have to be like propaganda doesn't have to be a dirty word. It's all in how it's used and why it's being used. And I really appreciate you sharing that example.
Well, I got two others. So
go for it.
One was beginning of when we started hitting Afghanistan heavy, and we still started using MOABs. We took out this one heavily fortified area with 3 MOABs, and after we dropped it, and of course it's only going to work on the eastern side of Afghanistan because this is where we're dropping them, and we literally got the Taliban so believing that we're dropping nukes on them because MOAB's explosions big and large, that they thought we were dropping nukes, and we got like over 200 Taliban fighters surrendering because they didn't want nukes dropped on them,
right,
or their families.
Right.
So I mean, just convincing them that we were, doing that alone got us a peaceful, resolution on the back end.
That's another great example. So I think to speak to this example, it's also example. Somebody said something earlier about lying to people. PsyOp doesn't have to be a lie. You didn't, correct me if I'm wrong, you never said you were dropping nukes. It's just they know what a nuke is. They see that big explosion, and they, it's only after the fact, like, oh, they think we're nuking them, So it doesn't, you don't have to actively lie to someone. You just do the things based on what they know and how you anticipate they'll react. You just do the thing, and then their behavior is somewhat predictable, and it tends to go in the direction you want them to go, which in that case was surrender more.
Well, I mean, and this covers kind of like what we're touching on earlier with a couple of the other guests, is the fact that in civilian terms, normally what we call it is propaganda.
Yeah.
I mean, there's times when we just like twist one word, like Tim's saying, and you just slightly change something, and then they believe it because they know that we have the capability, and then they're like, oh, okay. So it's just like but you're looking for, at least for what we were doing, we're looking for more peaceful outcomes.
Yeah.
And what to do on that.
100%.
And then the civilian PsyOps that we were doing were basically, they were basically trying to get people to understand that there was an Afghan government. At least when I was there was an Afghan government, and one of the simplest things, they were doing the stupid leaflet drops, and I was like, this is horrible. These people could barely read. I was like, dude,
Yeah.
seriously, there's all these taxis and jingle trucks. Literally make them moving billboards and just throw billboards on there saying, like, when an election's going to happen in this town, or the 911 that they use, or, you know, just basic civil service stuff. And that's basics, like, civilian PsyOp stuff that we're doing.
Yeah, so because I know a lot of people aren't familiar with like the military PsyOp, the way the command structure works is there's an organization called Civil Affairs, and psychological operations and civil affairs actually in the army, which is where most of the PsyOp is. The civil affairs also they fall under the same command structure of the PsyOp. So the civil affairs are interfacing with the civilians in a country where there's conflict. So they're the ones gathering. I mean, aside separate from the intel community, they're also gathering a lot of cultural goodwill and cultural data that can then be passed off to the PsyOp. At the same time, if they're trying to do things with the civilian populace and the civilian populace is suspicious of them or reticent, then PsyOp can help, you know, sway the civilian populace to be more compliant and cooperative and interested in what civil affairs may have to offer.
Yeah, pretty much. I just wanted to help you out with your explanations on PsyOps.
Especially with those periods.
Real world examples.
Yeah, those periods where I had moved. That guy asked me the question about, you know, certain time frame that I couldn't answer. So I really do appreciate you providing those examples and letting me kind of pontificate about them so that maybe people will understand better.
Yeah, and like I said, they're not like classified or anything. It's just easy for people to understand.
Yeah.
So.
Excellent. Again, thanks, man.
Okay, I had a really quick question from a PsyOp perspective, but like without the military aspect.
Sure.
From the business perspective, do you see PsyOps as being useful in marketing? And if so, how? And do you have any book recommendations?
I don't have any book recommendations, but you know, one of the things I pointed out earlier is I don't think there is a distinct difference between advertising and PsyOp. So it's all about what you're trying to accomplish. So I would say any advertising campaign is indistinguishable from a PsyOp, except an advertising campaign has a commercial product and it wants money, and a PsyOp has a cultural or political product and it wants compliance. Other than that, it's just advertising. They're one and the same. So is PsyOp useful for marketing? I mean, it's like asking, is advertising useful for marketing? Absolutely. I mean, they're all tied in there together. Now, because it's called PsyOp, you know, again, it has that kind of mystique to it. But I really want to drive this point home to everybody listening. It's not magic. It's not hypnosis. Like, which it was hypnosis and subliminal stuff also exist. That's more what I was saying earlier about PsyOp is about cultures and about groups. You can manipulate individuals. If you're a narcissist, you do it almost sort of naturally. But, you know, emotional blackmail, hypnosis, subliminal messaging, those things can be applied against individuals. But that's not PsyOp. PsyOp is just advertising, but with a cultural, political outcome rather than a commercial one.
So do you suggest studying the last part? Yes, the philosophy. Would you suggest studying psychology and philosophy then to get more of a handle on that?
Yeah, I think anybody that's like doing advertising campaigns is heavily versed, even if they don't have like formal training. They've made the study of human behavior informally a major emphasis of how they, you know, push their products out to people. Like, if you don't know what motivates people, then you're not going to motivate them to buy your thing.
Okay, thank you very much.
Absolutely.
You about some like fantasy sci-fi stuff. Appreciate you pulling me up. I will jump off now.
Awesome.
All right.
Put the whole PsyOp stuff aside. If somebody wants counseling and can't afford it, or you want counseling but you don't want to go to somebody who's going to like sell you a bunch of woke leftist garbage, like, I'm available. And we can have conversations once a month, once a quarter. Like, we don't have to like talk every week if that's not what you want. But I do that. That's my way of giving back. That's my way of participating in culture the way that I want. And if you think it's great that I do that and that I do it for free, you should buy some books because I make money other ways. So I have 13 novels. The Starscape Chronicles is a science fiction space adventure. Swords of Faith is a traditional like fantasy of like medieval flair. And the Paratus Intervention, which is on audiobook on YouTube and Rumble for free. You can just listen to those and come talk to me about them tomorrow at 2 o'clock right here again on the Discord. And again, thanks for letting me say my piece and do my thing.